Welcome everybody to this leadership team meeting. And could we please remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy by having 72 seconds silent? And please will you turn off your phones? Let me apologies for absence. Any declarations to be passed? The minutes of the previous meeting, can I sign them as a chair and record? Tim?
So a small thing, and that's Emma's lost her title. That's Emma will probably got the member.
What's the
Well, we're talking about the motion.
Thank you. As the first two items on the agenda have exempt appendices which we need to consider confidentially, I suggest that we actually go next door and discuss both item 4, item 5 exempt appendices, and then regroup here in a few minutes. Thank you. So agenda item 4, which is the global settlement of claims, which is the proposed settlement of claims from separate groups of payments interpreted by the Grenfell tragedy and represented by BLA. So the report seeks our approval to enter into a global settlement agreement. And I think it's very important that we do so, because by us agreeing our share of the global settlement, it means that bereaved survivors and local residents, they don't have to go through court proceedings. And as we all know, court proceedings can be very lengthy and actually incredibly traumatizing. And by agreeing the terms of this, that you can find that they can avoid this additional trauma in their lives, and ensure that the claims are resolved and people are compensated as quickly and as fairly as they can be. And I think if we do agree that, then that really helps people on their journey to recovery. So we have discussed this in the confidential session. I believe we're all agreed that this is a good way to progress, and I'd like the leadership team to agree the recommendations in paragraph 2. Agreed. Thank you. Could we please look at the next agenda item, which was agenda item 5, which is the acquisition of property to enable its use as supported housing by housing, social investment and property. Again, we have just the details of this in closed session. But Emma, I think you'd like to make any comments.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. I think I mainly firstly want to thank Dan and Christine and the team for making this happen. Sorry, my glasses are croaked. Thank you for making this happen. And it's not always we bring what I think is actually a good news story to the leadership team. And I think this is by buying this building, which has fallen into very poor state of repair that Look Ahead have allowed it to get into, we will be able to provide accommodation for, really, it says homeless, but it's important these aren't just homeless people, these are homeless who have they've got very strong needs associated with that. So they're not on TA, very, very vulnerable group of users. And, we are struggling with short of places, they're disappearing in the borough, we've already lost 2. So I think for us to have the opportunity to purchase this, make it nice again and support those people is a good thing. And I think it's probably what I'm going to say, really.
Yes.
Unless Dan and Christine feel anything very compelling, wish they want to add anything in this topic.
No, other than to say, to echo as the Will mentioned, and it's really owning the building gives us a greater degree of control over its ongoing policy. But even though we will obviously be commissioning a provider to provide the kind of wrapping and support the council was talking about, but being the landlord makes a lot of difference in terms of us being able to control the quality of the building. And of course, the other thing to say is that we've done a very detailed assessment in terms of the kind of cost analysis, the cost of acquiring, plus the cost of work that we need to do to the building to bring it to the standard that we want to provide for these residents. We're confident that when balanced against the cost of the alternatives, there's still a strong value for the council to proceed, which is why we're really
and actually, sort of one further thing I probably would say is, for me, this is part of a bigger picture. Similar to buying Kingsbridge House, that we are really trying to focus on a group of the adults and the more vulnerable adults, because we haven't really had the capex spent on the last few years. So this is us really prioritising and trying to transform that. We're not done. Johnny and something.
Thanks. This seems like an excellent thing to be doing, but I guess as with any acquisition, there'll be risks. So I wondered if you could talk a bit more about some of the risks that you foresee with going through with this. And I guess one of them would presumably be that if we didn't acquire the building, then as you talk about having a degree of control, we might lose control if another operator operated house of the building.
Yeah. So to take the second half first. I think there's 2 principal scenarios in the world where we don't acquire everything. Scenario number 1 is that someone else acquires it and we continue to commit those services from it. That's a that's a less good outcome, I think, than the outcome we're recommending, because of course we don't have control over the long-term use of the building for that purpose. But there's another scenario, which is that someone could purchase it and either not use it for that purpose, choose not to use it for that purpose, or be commissioned by someone else to provide that service there. We'd have no kind of control over whether we'd be able to commission service there. In that world, the demand for this high needs support would still be there, as Councillor Wills described, and we'd then be looking to commission that from elsewhere. It's very hard for me to sit here now and tell you that I can think of another building we could do that in the borough. So then we'd be starting to look at how commissioning that outside the borough, which of course, given that these are our residents, would be a really suboptimal option from a whole range of points of view. So you're absolutely right. So the implication of the question, which is that we're managing those risks by recommending the acquisition, it's actually that. There are, of course, as you say, risks associated with proceeding as we're recommending. Again, you could probably split those into two categories. There's the risks associated with the kind of the immediate term, i.e., we've made some estimates, some pretty well-informed estimates about the cost that we incur to bring it back into an acceptable state, and there's briefing about that. And until we take acquisition, there's always an element of unknown about what we're taking on. We've done so much due diligence around that. There's also a longer term risk, I guess, about the quantity of demand for this kind of service, and whether we're making a bet on a sustained level of demand. But of course, the fact that we will own the building means that we can track that demand into the future. And if it makes sense for us to repurpose it in the future, or subject to a business case, we've always got that option too. But this is one of our accommodation needs. We can be fairly confident, and of course, in the end, it's an asset. And if it becomes surplus in the future, we then have the option to dispose of it ourselves. So I think that's certainly a risk, but it's a risk which we can probably mitigate quite effectively over time. Is there anything you want to add, Christine? I'm thinking particularly in terms of kind of the immediate term transactional and conversion risks.
Yes, so the proposal is to remodel and refurbish, and so we have done all of the survey work associated with that, which helps us to get a reasonable level of cost estimate. We are not going to complete until we've seen all of the survey information and assessed that, and we still have one survey outstanding, which we're waiting for the results from, which we anticipate receiving and being able to assess before the date we intend to complete the transaction. So I think we are minimising the risk of not being clear what it is that we're buying, what we intend to do, and how much it's going to cost, as far as providing the right level of contingency to make sure that we deliver as we aim to, which within the budget envelope that we've identified in Part B.
Thank you. So last words to you.
Well, I just want to say thank you.
Okay, sorry.
I just want to say thank you very much, because I know this has also been a real kind of cross-team working effort. Cojo and Housing Needs has been really instrumental in leading on this alongside you. I think it's the way forward, as Emma said, prioritising our most vulnerable residents. I mean, I don't think we'll have any trouble filling it. I mean, it's 68 residents, we had to decant them and find our place for them, and it's been very difficult to do that. We have over 500 people who need this kind of accommodation, and again, we all know that there's some of our more challenging life issues they have, and they really do need our support. And I've seen the initial designs, which I hope we're going to be able to do. The accommodation we're providing is going to be really good, and then if you start from a good place, a good home, you're going to be much more likely to be able to kind of meet those other challenges that life throws at you. So I think it is absolutely essential for doing this. I think it's brilliant. Emma and I have been to visit it before. I mean, to be frank, it was shocking, the condition. But in terms of the risk that Johnny was saying, that could someone else have about, I think a lot of other providers of this type of accommodations are actually fleeing this role because of the extra concerns about providing this kind of accommodation. So I don't think so. I think probably the second risk is probably more likely that someone else might try to get it. So, but hopefully we won't get to that, and we will be able to carry on. But I completely recommend this decision in this case. I think it's excellent.
Thank you. Yes, last word to you.
Well, echoing what Sof has said. So, a quick question. I couldn't see it within the report So we're not decanting anybody on this, are we?
No, so they've already been decanted because the vendor Look Ahead wanted to start a building, and that was sort of it.
And our contract was out, so we have a contract in housing needs to look after this, we look after these residents, we look ahead, and that's coming again. So
And then my second point is that the filling this, I mean, you talk about 17 people identified, 40 to 50 people out of borough, and 6 weeks waiting for high support. You would anticipate filling this, that's obviously over the number of units we're going to have. So are you anticipating to take all the people out of borough at all? I just wonder what sort of process is going to be to fill the space.
I would say that the because there's a considerable period of time for us to get in and do the work before we're able to move people back in. What you've got in the report is a kind of indication of what the current demand is today.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to say too much about what the demand will be at the point that we're reoccupying. As we say, I think it would be foolish to predict it will be much lower than that. But the profile of exactly how we match individual people to the building is one I wouldn't want to say too much about. The others, things will change eventually. That profile will change.
Mary from the OSC.
Well, not from the OC, but just from me. In passing, just to note that actually the Housing Committee had a working group on hospitals, which is going to report in January, because it's a very important issue. I just wanted to ask about the GLA grant and how long. So we're modelling ourselves basically to get as much grant as possible. The condition of that is that we turn it into this. How long does that condition last? Because you talk quite rightly about the possibility of changing demand. We might need to remodel again, or we might want to sell it. How much does that GLA grant circumscribe us, and for how long? Shall I turn up? Yeah. So when you get GLA grant on something like this, they will put in effect a charge on the property, and the period it can be variable. And the period could be anything depending on what it is, between 10 and 40 years. And it is on the basis that the grant would need to be repaid if you were to do something different. So in doing this and getting the grant, it's because you're doing it for this purpose. So we're buying it for supported housing, and the GLA grant is for that purpose. But we would have to repay grant if we were to in proportions, depending on the time, if we at a future point in time chose to do something else with Quilter.
So you mean depending on how long we'd had it in use for both?
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Then Wales leadership team, whether they agree the recommendations of Power Picture.
Agree.
Now we go to item 6, which is about PSPs for these vehicles. Do you have anything you want to say about this?
It's very straightforward. It's one of those difficult decisions politicians have to take, which only have a 97% approval rate. But really, it speaks to the fact that our residents have recognised that this PSPO that was brought in a few years ago with Johnny bringing in acoustic cameras, predominantly because of issues we had on Sloane Street, Brompton and Handstown. We found that so effective was the PSPO that we managed to push the problem all over the rest of the borough. But actually, we now have the mechanism and the tools to deal with that problem. We've expanded the number of cameras we have around Kensington and Chelsea through a combination of council funds, neighbourhood SIL, resident community groups, bidding for the money. And the feedback that we're receiving, it's notable that actually Sloane Street is very low on the streets which are causing issue. It's now areas along the Red Route, sort of Chelsea Embankment, Holland Road, where we've seen difficulty in trying to get TfL to work with us on putting these cameras on their infrastructure. I think the last one took 18 months, I believe, to get the camera on Chelsea Embankment and on Pembroke in Abingdon. So really, I'm recommending we bring it forward. I think there's tweaking we could probably do to the PSPO in the years ahead. I think noise is becoming ever more a pollutant that people recognise needs tackling, not just the aggressive nature of the way it's generated, but actually noise itself. Something that perhaps we could look at expanding this PSPO to years ahead.
You questions, Sarah?
Thank you. Well, I really welcome this because I have a number of red routes in my ward. My question is, why are we restricting the hours between noon and 6 a.m.? Because people don't drive necessarily socially and the other hours.
I think it's most proportionate. So there's a lot of publicity, and there's a lot of what goes into kind of reviewing a PSPO and ensuring it doesn't encroach with civil liberties. So we can generally make a case for PSPO where we have evidence, and our current evidence base is skewed towards the hours that kind of we've proposed. But that's the current position. Obviously, in future, we always look at that, but we can always look to vary the PSPO. But at present, the evidence we've got supports those times, and we believe it's proportionate to kind of address that behaviour during those times.
Johnny.
Yeah, so thank you. Obviously, I welcome this, and I think it's been 3 years now since we did the Silence of the Lambos. I had a couple of different categories of questions. One is kind of on the PSPO, and the other is kind of on the consultation. So on the PSPO, these all last for 3 years, yes, and there's a risk that some of them lapse. And I know at certain times we've run the risk of that. Is there a mechanism we can put in that prevents these PSPOs from lapsing? It might be as simple as a reminder to departments when they're due to lapse, but it's something that can happen if we're not careful. The second part of that question was on whether we can strengthen the language that we have in the PSPO, because I think it uses phrases like excessive revving, which is quite specific and means that essentially, unless you're at a stoplight, it's quite difficult to for officers to defend the decisions and find somebody, because if you rev at a stoplight, that's kind of natural, and if you're driving, you may not be fined. And then the third part to that question was, in order to review triggers on the cameras, it's quite time consuming, etc. What work are we doing? Can you update us on work to create a kind of steady state position for how the cameras are operated?
3 questions.
And then I'm going to come back on the consultation if I have time.
Sure. Okay, answer the first question is yes, simple calendar reminders can ensure that we input things in a timely fashion. So I think you answered that final question. Second is, can we vary the term to the PSPO? The answer is no. We consulted on the wording and the offence itself.
In the future.
But yes, we absolutely can. Yeah. So if we found there was kind of another offence with evidence all the offences in there, wanted to change the word, then we could. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And the third thing on the camera, yes, it does require a manual person to review each instance. And we are looking at other technology. I mean, the council's got quite an ambitious digital appetite to look at those kind of areas. We are doing that. What was the 3 questions?
Yeah, those are the 3.
Okay. So yes, yes, and yes.
Good. Those are the kinds of questions I like. My next batch of questions is from donning my ward councillor hat. I'm mindful that we may cite cameras based on the consultation that we've undergone for the PSPO, so I'm anxious that we get this right. I can see in the report that it says there was only partial support for the PSPO in the petition that was presented from Holland Road. I went out with a resident and got those signatures, and I know that the wording of the petition was specific, that they supported the use of the cameras on Holland Road. So can we amend or take account of the fact that it wasn't 184 of the 242, but the total number of those people who signed that supported use of acoustic cameras? And then later on in the report, where we list the streets on which there were the highest number of either complaints about noise or support for acoustic cameras, if there were 242 signatories in relation to Holland Road, that should feature at the top of the list, and it's currently 4th or 5th. So can we amend either the report on that point, or can we give a kind of assurance that we'll take account of that fact in how we cite cameras going forward?
So I think Jim discussed earlier, it's a borough-wide PSPO, so it allows us to use those powers within the borough. So the kind of placement of the cameras is secondary. So if we have evidence support with the complaint, service requests, the camera in a location, if it's proportionate response to that location, it can be done. Obviously, outside of the legal framework and authorisation, we have a resource need, and we have a finite budget. So provided we can find the funding, NCIL has been discussed with a really good board-based approach of doing that. And then yes, absolutely, where there's a case and we have a resource, we can deploy them. But yes, it allows borough-wide placement. And I think all I also want to say is that it's not just about cameras. So all of those offences that are listed in 2.1, and they can also be witnessed by an officer. So we can also build a case, we can address individual traumatic behaviour through statements from either witnesses or our officers, and obviously council is another example. But yes, we can place them elsewhere in the borough, and we'll continue to review the complaints we get and kind of how we place them.
Again, following Johnny with my ward councillor hat on, because as Jem said, BHT were the first to do this, and I remember working very closely with both Johnny and Jem on this, because it was the #1 issue in our email inbox as ward councillors. And I noticed that Knightsbridge on the comments on locations is a lowly pie compared to Charleston Bank and Kings Road. I would just like to remind everybody that it has actually been shut more or less the last 2 years when this consultation was going on, and it might well be coming back. And I hope that we will still definitely get our BHT ward funded acoustic camera on Stone Street back again, please. And also just to say, it really does. I think it really has worked. Yeah. I mean, and sadly, probably has moved to other parts of the borough. And I just want to congratulate all the officers who have worked on this, because we have had other councils coming to us to ask us how we have done this, because lots of other councils have noise issues. Well, it's not just Lamborghinis, it's now increasingly souped up home counties cars or motorbikes or whatever. And we really have been leading the way. We've managed to combine our regulation with our PSPO with technology and community council. So thank you very much. And just remember about Stone Street.
I'll pass my comments on to the team who worked hard on this, and thank them for supporting us.
Okay, around the table, I expect everyone's going to be begging you.
Yes.
Cameras, but Catherine.
It was just a really quick one out of interest. There's the perception of what residents obviously find most annoying, and then you've got all that is there. Have you got a percentage of when you give the tickets out, when they get the fixed penalty notice, of all the ones that you've got there, which ones went most to you? I mean, was it revving and engines and noise, or don't you separate them out into the different areas that you?
So we don't buy, as a matter of fact. So the offence isn't the offence listed within the kind of what could be a breach of it. The offence is the breach of the PSPO. So under the offence code, it's breach.
Oh, so
PSPO.
you don't separate
These. However, each issue of an FPN is supported by evidence, so you could go back and do like a breakdown and look through it, or if that was required.
Okay, well, no, I was just interested.
If we really look at, I agree. We can. Yeah. It's only 597 if we could have.
Mary, any comments from you?
No, apart from endorsing soft comments about BHP and how pleased we were to have it.
Okay, what do we? So, please tell me, accept the recommendations in paragraph 2. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the final item tonight, I think it's pretty straightforward, which is council's contribution to the London Borough's grant scheme, which will be £110,633, and is subject to approval by the council before 17th of January. What's the date today?
Thank you. Yes.
God makes sense. I'm glad to hear that. And it's an increase of £708 and can be contained within existing financial plan. So,
Just have a question. Thank you,
quick
Chair.
question.
A true question for me. I know it's not our pitch, but I do support London Council and all the lobbying effort they do. But Lisa, why has this come to LT at such a small amount for such a public discussion, basically?
So it comes here every year. London Council ask that we get approval from members to agree to sign up to this scheme for another year, and they seek to have, I think it's 22 councils across London agree. They get less than that, they still go ahead anyway. So they're trying to get buy-in from councils, really.
You've got to more for the decision rather than the decision
Absolutely.
itself.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the leader's point, the notification from London Councils fell between leadership team meetings, so we couldn't get it completed by the 17th. But I've been in touch with them. I've shared with them the draft paper, and they're fine. Nancy says we've got enough thing, and they're fine.
Thank you very much. Mary, anything for you? No, can we agree that then? Thank you. Recommendations. And is there any other business? No, I wish you all a very good.
If they go ahead.
Yes. These papers need to be taken in by employee, please. I don't know, any exempt,